My business partner framed me for fraud, yelling I built this company. My lawyer said, I have no case. The FBI agent slid the arrest warrant across the conference table, and I actually laughed because I thought it was some kind of elaborate prank. Special Agent Thomas Brennan, 23 years with the Bureau's white-collar crime division, didn't crack a smile. He just pointed to the signature at the bottom, official and damning, and said, Mr. Volkov, you're being charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering totaling approximately $3.8 million. My business partner, Jeffrey Ashworth, sat at the other end of the table with our company's board of directors, his face a perfect mask of shock and betrayal. Then he stood up, slammed his fist on the mahogany surface, and screamed at me with genuine rage in his voice. I built this company, Zachary. I built it from nothing while you were bleeding it dry. The room erupted. Board members shouting, my assistant crying in the corner, someone calling security, and me sitting there in my tailored suit with coffee still warm in my cup, realizing that my entire life had just been stolen from me by the person I trusted most in the world. And the worst part? I had no idea how he'd done it. Not yet. But I was about to find out, and what I discovered would destroy him completely. My name is Zachary Volkov, and I'm 39 years old. I was, the co-founder and chief technology officer of Neural Edge Solutions, a software company specializing in artificial intelligence for healthcare diagnostics. We'd built the company from scratch 7 years earlier, Jeffrey and me, working 18-hour days in a cramped office we could barely afford, surviving on ramen and ambition. Jeffrey Ashworth had been my college roommate at MIT, a business major with charisma that could sell ice to Eskimos and a work ethic that matched my own. I was the tech genius, the one who could code the algorithms and build the systems. He was the businessman, the one who could pitch to investors and close deals. We were the perfect partnership, or so I thought. By the time we hit our 5th year, Neural Edge was valued at $80 million. We had contracts with major hospital networks across the country, a team of 60 employees, and venture capital firms fighting to invest in our next round of funding. Jeffrey was the CEO, I was the CTO, and we each owned 49% of the company, with the remaining 2% split between early employees. We had offices in downtown Seattle, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, the kind of place that made you feel successful just walking through the doors every morning. Jeffrey and I had adjacent offices, and we'd spend hours every week strategizing, planning our next moves, talking about going public in the next year or two. We were best friends. We were brothers. We trusted each other completely. Looking back now, I can pinpoint exactly when things started to change, even though I didn't recognize it at the time. It was about 8 months before the FBI showed up, during our Series C funding round. We'd brought in a new chief financial officer, a woman named Diana Kovacs, who had 20 years of experience in corporate finance and came highly recommended from one of our board members. She was sharp, meticulous, and within her first week, she'd identified inefficiencies in our spending that saved us nearly $40,000. Jeffrey seemed uncomfortable around her from the start. He'd make excuses to cut meetings short when she was presenting financial reports, or he'd dismiss her concerns about certain expenditures with vague explanations about strategic investments. I noticed it, but I told myself Jeffrey was just adjusting to having someone else scrutinize the books. He'd always been protective of the business side of things, wanting to maintain control over the company's direction. Then Diana came to me privately one afternoon, closing my office door and sitting down with a thick folder in her hands. Zachary, I need to show you something, she said, her expression serious. And I need you to not mention this conversation to Jeffrey until we figure out what's going on. My stomach tightened. What is it? She opened the folder and pulled out a series of printouts, bank statements, and wire transfer records. I've been reconciling our accounts, and I found some irregularities. There are transfers going to a vendor called Quantum Insights LLC, a consulting firm that's supposedly helping us with market analysis. We've paid them nearly $600,000 over the past 18 months. I frowned, looking at the numbers. Okay, Jeffrey handles vendor relationships. What's the problem? The problem is that I can't find any contracts with Quantum Insights. No signed agreements, no deliverables, no actual reports or analysis from them. I've searched our entire system, and when I tried to look up the company, I found a business registration in Delaware, but no website, no employees listed, nothing. It's basically a shell company. My mouth went dry. Maybe it's a confidential project Jeffrey's working on, something he hasn't told the broader team about yet. Diana nodded slowly. That's possible, but there's more. I found similar payments to 2 other vendors, Apex Strategic Partners and Meridian Group. Same pattern, no contracts, no deliverables, shell companies with minimal online presence. Combined, we're talking about $1.2 million over the past 2 years. The room felt too small suddenly. Have you asked Jeffrey about this? I tried, she said. He told me they were legitimate consulting fees, and that I didn't have the clearance to access those contracts because they involved proprietary strategic planning. He said to drop it. And you didn't? I asked. I'm the CFO, she said. It's literally my job to verify every dollar that leaves this company. And right now, I can't verify where $1.2 million went. That's a problem, Zachary. A big one. I told her I'd look into it, that I'd talk to Jeffrey privately and figure out what was going on. She made me promise not to tell him she'd brought it to me, and I agreed, even though the promise made me feel like I was betraying my best friend. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. That night, I stayed late at the office after everyone had left. I had administrative access to our financial systems, the same level as Jeffrey and Diana, and I started digging through records. What I found made my hands start shaking. The payments Diana had identified were just the beginning. There were dozens of similar transactions, going back almost 3 years, to various vendor names I didn't recognize. The amounts varied, anywhere from $15,000 to $100,000, and they were always labeled as consulting fees, market research, or strategic services. I cross-referenced them with our vendor management system, and just like Diana had said, there were no contracts, no contact information, no paper trail. I pulled up the corporate registrations for a few of these companies and found they were all registered to the same address in Delaware, a known hub for shell corporations. My heart was pounding. This didn't make sense. Jeffrey wouldn't steal from our own company, from the business we'd built together. There had to be an explanation. I decided to confront him directly the next morning, to ask him what was going on and give him a chance to explain before jumping to conclusions. But when I got to the office the next day, Jeffrey wasn't there. His assistant said he'd called in sick, something about food poisoning. He didn't answer my texts or calls all day. He was gone for 3 days, and when he finally came back, he looked terrible, like he hadn't slept. Dark circles under his eyes, skin pale, movements jittery. "Hey," I said, walking into his office. "You okay? You look rough." "Yeah, just some stomach bug," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I'm fine now. We need to talk," I said, closing the door. "About the company finances?" He looked up sharply. "What about them?" "Diana found some irregularities," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Payments to vendors we don't have contracts with. Shell companies. Can you explain that?" His jaw tightened. "Diana needs to stay in her lane. Those are legitimate business expenses for projects you're not involved in." "Jeffrey, we're partners," I said. "I'm involved in everything. What projects are you talking about?" "Acquisitions," he said quickly. "I've been exploring potential acquisition targets, and I hired consultants to do due diligence. It's confidential because if word gets out that we're looking to acquire competitors, it'll drive up their valuations." It sounded plausible. Almost. "Okay," I said. "Can you show me the contracts? The reports they've provided?" "They're at my house," he said. "I keep them separate for security reasons. I'll bring them in next week." "Next week? Jeffrey, this is important. Bring them in tomorrow." He stood up abruptly. "Zachary, I don't appreciate being interrogated. I've been handling the business side of this company for 7 years while you've been locked in the tech lab. Trust me, everything is fine. Now if you'll excuse me, I have calls to make." I left his office feeling like I'd just had a conversation with a stranger. The Jeffrey I knew didn't deflect like that, didn't get defensive when questioned. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and I needed to figure out what it was before it destroyed everything we'd built. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Jeffrey was spending more time out of the office, claiming meetings with investors and potential partners. When he was in the office, he kept his door closed more than usual. He'd become protective of his computer, always locking the screen when anyone walked by. And he'd started drinking more, I'd noticed, keeping a bottle of expensive scotch in his desk drawer and pouring himself glasses in the afternoon. I mentioned my concerns to Diana, and she told me she'd been doing her own investigation. "I hired a private forensic accountant," she said, during another closed-door meeting in my office. "Someone outside the company who can look at this objectively. His name is Kenneth Lawson, and he's been doing this for 30 years. He specializes in corporate fraud cases." "Fraud?" I said, the word tasting bitter. "You really think Jeffrey is committing fraud?" "I think someone is moving money out of this company illegally," she said. "And Jeffrey is the only person with the authority and access to do it on this scale. I wanted to wait until we had more evidence before bringing it to the board. But Zachary, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that your business partner is not who you think he is." Kenneth Lawson came to meet with us the following week, a methodical man in his late 50s with gray hair and reading glasses that he constantly adjusted. He'd brought a laptop and a thick binder full of printouts, and he walked us through what he'd found. "The pattern is sophisticated," he explained, pointing to spreadsheets that made my head spin. "Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. The shell companies are layered, multiple levels of corporate structures designed to obscure the ultimate beneficiary. But I was able to trace several of the companies back through their registered agents, and they all connect to a single entity, a holding company called Ashworth Capital Management." My stomach dropped. "Ashworth? As in Jeffrey Ashworth?" Kenneth nodded. "The company was registered 4 years ago, and Jeffrey Ashworth is listed as the sole owner and director. From what I can tell, funds from Neural Edge are being transferred to these shell companies, which then move the money to Ashworth Capital Management, where it's being invested in real estate and stock portfolios in Jeffrey's name." Diana was watching my face. "Zachary, I'm sorry, but the evidence is pretty clear. Jeffrey has been embezzling from the company for years. We're looking at a total of approximately $3.8 million. I couldn't breathe. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below, trying to process what I was hearing. My best friend, my business partner, the person I'd trusted with everything, had been systematically stealing from our company for 4 years. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We need to go to the board, Diana said, and we need to involve law enforcement. This is criminal. Wait, I said, turning back to them. Before we do that, I need to talk to Jeffrey. I need to hear his explanation. Zachary, that's a bad idea, Kenneth said. If he knows we're onto him, he could destroy evidence, move money offshore, or worse. People who commit fraud at this level don't respond well to being confronted. I don't care, I said. He's my friend. I need to give him a chance to explain himself before I destroy his life. It was the wrong decision, and I knew it even as I made it, but I couldn't help myself. I called Jeffrey that night and asked him to meet me at our favorite bar downtown, a quiet place where we'd celebrated every major milestone in the company's history. He showed up 30 minutes late, looking nervous, and ordered a double whiskey before even sitting down. What's this about? He asked. I slid a folder across the table, the one Kenneth had given me with the key findings of his investigation. I know about Ashworth Capital Management. I know about the shell companies. I know you've been stealing from Neural Edge. He opened the folder, looked at the first page, and closed it again. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then he laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You always were too trusting, Zach. Too focused on the code to see what was happening in the real world. Why? I asked, my voice shaking. Why would you do this? We were partners. We were friends. Friends? He said bitterly. You ever notice how everyone always talks about your algorithms, your brilliant mind, your innovations? It's always Zachary Volkov, the genius behind Neural Edge. What about me? I'm the one who built the business. I'm the one who convinced investors to give us money. I'm the one who closed the deals, but you get all the credit. That's not true, I said. You've always been recognized. Recognized as what? He snapped. As your sidekick? As the guy who handles the boring business stuff while you do the real work? I've given 7 years of my life to this company, and I deserve to be compensated for it. You own 49% of the company, I said. You're already being compensated. You're rich. Jeffrey. Not rich enough, he said. Not compared to what I could be. Do you know what our company will be worth when we go public? $1 billion? Maybe more? And we'll each own just under half. But what if I owned more? What if I controlled the company outright? The realization hit me like a truck. You're planning to force me out. He smiled, and it was the smile of someone who'd already won. I've been planning it for 2 years, and tomorrow morning the board is going to receive an anonymous tip that you've been embezzling from the company. They're going to find evidence, carefully planted evidence, that points directly to you. They're going to investigate, and they're going to discover that all those payments to shell companies were authorized by you, not me. Your digital signatures, your IP address, your access credentials, all of it. That's impossible, I said. I never authorized those payments. Doesn't matter, Jeffrey said. The logs say you did, and when the board fires you for cause, which they will, your shares will be forfeited according to the founders' agreement we signed, and I'll buy them at a steep discount, giving me majority control of the company I built. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're going to frame me for your own crimes. I already have, he said, standing up. By this time tomorrow you'll be ruined, your reputation destroyed, your career over, and there's nothing you can do about it because I've been planning this for so long. Every detail is perfect. You don't have the evidence to prove otherwise. You don't have the expertise to unwind what I've done. You're fucked, Zach. Completely and totally fucked. He walked out, leaving me sitting there alone with an untouched beer and the smoking ruins of my entire life. I called Diana immediately and told her what Jeffrey had said. We scheduled an emergency meeting with the board for first thing in the morning, planning to present Kenneth's findings and expose Jeffrey before he could execute his plan, but we were already too late. I woke up at 6:15 a.m. to 38 missed calls and a text from Diana that said, "Don't come to the office. FBI is here." I threw on clothes and drove to Neural Edge anyway, and that's where I found myself 3 hours later, sitting in our conference room with Special Agent Thomas Brennan and our board of directors while Jeffrey performed the betrayal of the century. The evidence Jeffrey had manufactured was overwhelming. The FBI had logs showing that all the fraudulent payments had been initiated from my computer, using my credentials, during times when I was logged into the system. They had emails, supposedly from me, instructing the finance team to process payments to the shell companies. They had bank records showing that I'd accessed information about these companies from my work computer. They even had a witness, one of our junior accountants, who claimed I'd asked her to process several of the payments and told her to keep them confidential. It was all lies, all fabricated, but it looked real, terrifyingly real. "Mr. Volkov," Agent Brennan said, "you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." They arrested me right there in the office, in front of my employees, my board, my entire professional world. They put handcuffs on me and walked me through the lobby while people I'd worked with for years stared in horror. Jeffrey watched from his office window, and I swear I saw him smile. I was released on bail 6 hours later, $100,000 posted by my parents who'd driven up from California the moment they heard. I was suspended from Neural Edge pending investigation, banned from the office, and forbidden from accessing any company systems or communicating with employees. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. Leonard Friedman was a partner at one of Seattle's most prestigious law firms, known for defending white-collar crime cases. He had a reputation for being expensive but effective, and I figured I needed the best representation money could buy. I met him in his downtown office 2 days after my arrest, a sleek space that screamed wealth and success. Leonard was in his early 60s, silver-haired, with a calm demeanor that should have been reassuring, but somehow made me more nervous. I told him everything, the whole story, from my partnership with Jeffrey to the confrontation at the bar to the arrest. I showed him Kenneth Lawson's forensic accounting report, the evidence of Jeffrey's shell companies, all of it. He listened carefully, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Volkov," he said finally, "I'm going to be honest with you. Based on what you've told me and the evidence the prosecution has, I don't think you have a case." The room tilted. "What do you mean I don't have a case? Jeffrey framed me. The forensic accountant proved he's been embezzling." "The forensic accountant proved that money was embezzled," Leonard corrected. "But the evidence the FBI has points to you as the perpetrator. The fact that Jeffrey may also have been stealing doesn't exonerate you. In fact, it could be argued that you're trying to deflect blame onto your business partner. The prosecution will paint you as someone who got caught and is now desperately trying to shift responsibility." "But I didn't do it," I said, my voice rising. "I know what the evidence says, but it's manufactured. Jeffrey admitted to me that he set me up." "Can you prove that?" Leonard asked. "Were there witnesses to this conversation? Did you record it?" "No," I admitted. "It was just the two of us at a bar." "Then it's your word against his," Leonard said. "And unfortunately, his word is backed by a mountain of digital evidence that appears to prove you're guilty. I'm sorry, Mr. Volkov, but unless you can find concrete proof that Jeffrey manufactured this evidence, you're looking at serious prison time. The charges against you carry a potential sentence of 20 years. I left Leonard Friedman's office in a daze. 20 years. 2 decades of my life, gone, for crimes I didn't commit. I drove to my apartment in Belltown, a modern high-rise overlooking Elliott Bay, and sat on my balcony trying to figure out what to do. My phone was blowing up with messages. Friends asking if the news was true, investors pulling out of our funding round, employees expressing shock and disappointment, my mother calling every 15 minutes to check on me. I ignored all of it and focused on the one question that mattered. How do I prove Jeffrey did this? If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. The answer came to me at 3 a.m. while I was lying awake, staring at the ceiling. Jeffrey had said he'd been planning this for 2 years, that every detail was perfect. But nothing is perfect. People make mistakes, leave traces, get sloppy. And if Jeffrey had manufactured evidence to frame me, there had to be proof of that manufacturing somewhere. I needed someone who could find it, someone with expertise in digital forensics and cybersecurity, someone who could trace the manipulation of logs and files and emails. I knew exactly who to call. Her name was Vanessa Ortega, and she was a cybersecurity expert I'd met at a conference 3 years earlier. She ran her own firm specializing in digital forensics for corporations and law firms, and she had a reputation as one of the best in the business. We'd stayed in touch professionally, and I'd even referred some clients to her over the years. I called her at 9 a.m. and explained my situation. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "I'll need access to your computers, your phone, any devices you use for work, and I'll need authorization to examine Neural Edge's systems." "I don't have authorization," I said. "I'm suspended and banned from accessing anything." "Then we'll need a court order," Vanessa said. "I'll draft what we need and your lawyer can file it. But Zachary, you need to understand that this kind of investigation takes time. We're talking weeks, maybe months, to trace every piece of evidence and prove it was manufactured." "I don't have months," I said. "My trial is scheduled for 6 weeks from now." "Then we need to move fast," she said. "Send me everything you have, every document, every file, every piece of communication with Jeffrey. I'll start building a timeline." I spent the next 3 days compiling everything. 7 years of emails, text messages, financial records, meeting notes, everything I could find that documented my relationship with Jeffrey and our work together. I sent it all to Vanessa in encrypted files, and she got to work. In the meantime, I needed a new lawyer, someone who actually believed I was innocent and would fight for me. I called Diana Kovacs, who'd been placed on administrative leave from Neural Edge pending the investigation, and asked if she knew anyone. "There's a woman named Patricia Nguyen," Diana said. "She's a former federal prosecutor who now does defense work. She's expensive, but she's brilliant, and she has a reputation for taking on cases everyone else thinks are unwinnable." I met Patricia in her office the next day. She was in her early 40s, Vietnamese American, with sharp eyes and an intensity that made you pay attention. Her walls were covered with framed newspaper articles about cases she'd won, high-profile trials where she'd gone up against impossible odds and come out victorious. I told her my story, showed her the evidence, explained why Leonard Friedman had said I had no case. She listened, asked pointed questions, and when I finished, she leaned forward with her hands folded on the desk. "Leonard Friedman is a coward," she said bluntly. "He takes easy cases and charges obscene fees. What you need is someone willing to dig, to fight, to prove your innocence even when the evidence looks bad. That's what I do. So you'll take my case? I asked. On one condition, she said. You give me complete access to everything. No secrets, no holding back. If I'm going to prove Jeffrey framed you, I need to know every detail of your business, your partnership, your finances, all of it. Done, I said. Then we have a deal, Patricia said. Now let's talk about strategy. Vanessa Ortega is good, one of the best digital forensic experts in the country. If there's evidence that the logs were tampered with, she'll find it. But we also need to build a case that shows Jeffrey had motive, means, and opportunity to frame you. We need to show the jury why he'd do this and how he pulled it off. Over the next 4 weeks, Patricia and Vanessa worked together like a well-oiled machine. Vanessa examined every piece of digital evidence the prosecution had, tracing the metadata, analyzing the timestamps, looking for anomalies that would prove manipulation. Patricia, meanwhile, was building a comprehensive profile of Jeffrey, his finances, his communications, his movements over the past 4 years. She hired a private investigator who discovered that Jeffrey had recently purchased a $3 million beach house in the Bahamas, paid for in cash. She subpoenaed his bank records and found wire transfers that matched the timeline of the embezzlement. She interviewed former employees who described Jeffrey as increasingly paranoid and controlling in the months before my arrest. And then, 3 weeks before my trial, Vanessa found it, the smoking gun. She called me at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, her voice electric with excitement. Zachary, I found proof, definitive proof that the logs were manipulated. I nearly dropped my phone. What did you find? The timestamps on the fraudulent payment authorizations show they were made during times you were logged into the system, she explained. But when I examined the raw server logs, not the ones that were provided to the FBI, but the original backups that are automatically created and stored on a separate system, I found discrepancies. Someone went into the system and altered the logs after the fact, changing the timestamps and user credentials to make it look like you authorized the payments. Can you prove it was Jeffrey? I asked. I can prove the alterations were made from Jeffrey's computer, Vanessa said. I found traces of the editing software he used, a program designed for database manipulation, and I found deleted files on his hard drive that show drafts of the fake emails he created in your name. He tried to wipe them, but he didn't do a good enough job. I recovered them. I couldn't speak. I just sat there holding the phone, tears streaming down my face, because for the first time since this nightmare began, I had hope. Patricia filed an emergency motion with the court the next morning, presenting Vanessa's findings and requesting that the charges against me be dismissed. The prosecution fought back, arguing that the evidence was inconclusive, that there could be other explanations for the discrepancies. The judge ordered a hearing to examine the evidence, and that's when everything started to unravel for Jeffrey. The hearing took place on a Monday morning in federal court, Judge David Callahan presiding. He was a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years on the bench, known for his sharp intellect and intolerance for deception. Vanessa Ortega took the stand as our expert witness, and Patricia walked her through the findings methodically, carefully, making sure every detail was clear. Vanessa explained how she'd discovered the altered logs, showed the court the evidence of manipulation, demonstrated how Jeffrey's computer had been used to create the fake emails and documents. The prosecution tried to poke holes in her testimony, but Vanessa was unshakable. She had the technical expertise and the receipts to back up every claim. Then Patricia called Jeffrey to the stand. He walked up confidently, still playing the role of the betrayed business partner, and swore to tell the truth. Patricia destroyed him in under 20 minutes. Mr. Ashworth, can you explain why traces of database editing software were found on your work computer? She asked. I don't know, Jeffrey said. Maybe it was downloaded by mistake. We have an IT department that manages our systems. And can you explain why deleted files recovered from your computer contain drafts of emails that appear to be from Mr. Volkov, authorizing fraudulent payments? Jeffrey's face went pale. I have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea? Patricia repeated. Even though the files have metadata showing they were created by you, edited by you, and deleted by you? That's impossible, Jeffrey stammered. Someone must have hacked my computer. Someone hacked your computer to frame Mr. Volkov, but made it look like you did it? Patricia said. That seems unlikely, doesn't it? The judge intervened. Mr. Ashworth, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you alter the server logs to make it appear that Mr. Volkov authorized these fraudulent payments? Jeffrey looked around the courtroom, at me, at the judge, at Agent Brennan who was sitting in the gallery, and then something in him broke. I built that company, he said, his voice rising. I spent 7 years making it successful while Zachary got all the credit. Everyone always talking about his brilliance, his innovations, like I was just some glorified secretary. I deserved more. I deserved to own what I built. So you framed Mr. Volkov, Patricia said. You manufactured evidence to make him look guilty of your own crimes. He never appreciated what I did, Jeffrey said, almost talking to himself now. He never understood the sacrifices I made. So yes, I took what I was owed, and I would have gotten away with it if he hadn't hired some tech genius to go digging through server logs. The courtroom exploded. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Agent Brennan stood up and moved toward Jeffrey, and I just sat there, watching my former best friend confess to everything, validating every suspicion, confirming every betrayal. Judge Callahan dismissed all charges against me immediately. Jeffrey Ashworth was arrested on the spot, charged with embezzlement, wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and perjury. The prosecution later added charges of falsifying evidence and criminal conspiracy. The media coverage was insane. The story of a business partner who framed his co-founder for his own crimes hit every major news outlet within hours. Tech blogs, business journals, even mainstream news picked it up. Silicon Valley betrayal. How one founder framed his partner for millions in fraud, read one headline. Jeffrey's arrest photo, him being walked out of the courthouse in handcuffs, went viral. Neural Edge's board of directors held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to reinstate me as CTO and remove Jeffrey from all positions in the company. His shares were seized as part of the criminal proceedings, eventually being redistributed to employees and early investors. Diana Kovacs, who'd been the one to first discover the fraud, was promoted to CEO. The company survived, barely, but our reputation took a massive hit. We lost several major contracts, and our valuation dropped by 30%. It took us 2 years to rebuild trust with investors and clients, but we did it. We're stronger now, more transparent, with better controls and oversight. As for Jeffrey, his trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence against him was overwhelming, not just Vanessa's digital forensics, but also the financial records, the shell companies, the Bahamas beach house, everything. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution, which included the amount he'd stolen plus interest and penalties. I was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. Jeffrey didn't look at me, didn't show any emotion, just stared straight ahead as the judge pronounced sentence. 6 months after Jeffrey went to prison, I received a letter from him. It was forwarded through my lawyer, and I almost threw it away without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, and it said a lot of things: apologies, excuses, explanations. But one paragraph stood out. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to, but I want you to understand that I didn't do this out of malice. I did it because I felt invisible, like I'd spent my entire adult life in your shadow. That doesn't justify what I did, I know that. But maybe it helps you understand why. You were always the genius, the one everyone admired. I was just the business guy, and I couldn't live with that anymore. I read that paragraph 3 times, then folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I never responded. I didn't owe him that. A year later, Neural Edge went public. Our IPO was successful beyond anything we'd imagined, valuing the company at $1.4 billion. My stake made me wealthy beyond measure, but the money felt hollow somehow. The dream had always been to do this with Jeffrey, to celebrate together, to prove that 2 kids from MIT could build something that mattered. Instead, I stood on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange alone, surrounded by employees and investors, ringing the opening bell without my partner. Diana stood next to me, and after the bell rang and the applause died down, she leaned over and said, "He almost destroyed everything we built, but we survived. That's what matters." She was right. We'd survived. The company had survived, and I'd learned something valuable about trust, about partnership, about the importance of verification even when dealing with people you think you know. I still think about Jeffrey sometimes. Wonder what he's doing in prison, whether he regrets what he did, or just regrets getting caught. I think about the friendship we had, the late nights working together, the dreams we shared, and I mourn what we lost. But I don't regret how things ended, because the truth came out. Justice was served. And the person who tried to destroy me lost everything he stole, everything he built on lies, everything he thought he deserved. The last I heard, Jeffrey's up for parole in 12 years. I hope he's using the time to figure out who he is without the company, without the wealth, without the identity he stole from me. I hope he's learning what I learned, that success built on betrayal is no success at all. As for me, I'm still at Neural Edge, still building, still innovating. We just launched a new AI diagnostic tool that's being used in hospitals across the country, saving lives, making a difference. And every time I see one of our products in action, I'm reminded that the work matters more than the person who gets credit for it. Jeffrey never understood that. Maybe he will someday. But by then, it'll be too late. The company he claimed to have built, the success he thought he deserved, it all belongs to someone else now. It belongs to the people who actually earned it. And that's the most poetic justice I could have asked for. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.